where is your practice going to come from? So we don't say right and wrong, good or bad in Zen. We say skillful, unskillful, wholesome, unwholesome. I respectfully to urge you to study the mystery. You only get one mystery.
Welcome to Zen Center of Pittsburgh, Deep Spring Temple, and a Dharma talk given by resident head priest KOTOKU CRIVELLO.
So, the word training is something that we all use in Zen centers. How does your teacher train you, we say? How does your lineage train disciples, and so on? Like meditation, training is a bit of a misleading word for us. It's accurate, but a little misleading at the same time. Usually when we train for something, it means to develop a skill for a purpose. Something that we want to accomplish. Well, our training is about being skillful in the moment. And this room, we want to identify movements that allow us to continue to practice in stillness. Stillness and movement are the same. When a person moves in the Zendo correctly, we are able to be more still. It's not an interruption. How we move and how we treat objects helps us to balance our effort. But it's also caused bigger. The next century, Yangshan came along. He was in a small school. Didn't last very long, but very powerful nevertheless. And this is a koan that reflects something of what Shitao is trying to get at. And it's from the Book of Equanimity, which is the book of koans most favored by Soto Zen. Probably because they treat the practice of Zen not as a training exercise or way to achieve something, but how to live more fully in the moment. What is skillful versus unskillful, wholesome versus unwholesome? How is your day going? Would be more of a question for Soto Zen than how is your day leading to enlightenment? A little different. So this is case 32. Yangshan asked a monk, "Where are you from?" And the monk said, "From Yu province." "Oh, do you think of that place now?" He says, "Oh, I always think of it." And so the teacher said, "The thinker is the mind, and the thoughts of is the environment. Therein are mountains, rivers, and landmass, buildings, towers, halls, and chambers, people, animals, and so forth. Reverse your thoughts to think of the thinking mind. Are there so many things there?" The monk said, "When I get here, I don't see any existence at all. No existence at all." Yangshan said, "Well, that's the right stage for faith, but it's not yet right for the person." "Don't you have any other particular way of guidance?" the monk said. "To say that I have anything particular or not would not be accurate. Based on your insight, you only get one mystery. You can take the seat and wear the robe, but after this, see on your own." So, this is a monk who just arrived at the monastery. He's traveling, finding a teacher. He shows up at the gate. He meets Yangshan, and Yangshan just wants to see where this monk is. "What's your thinking?" So the monk's not a newcomer. He kind of gets it. The worst thing you want to do in a Zen dialogue is to smell like Zen. Say something Zen-y. "So, where do you come from?" Where do you come from? The monk understands this. He's understanding that the relative world is not separate from the absolute world. His awakening is not something that's going to occur somewhere else. So I think about my home all the time. But he said, okay, but teacher said, it's fine. But what about the mind itself? All these things that are going on. And the monk says, well, when I get here, when I'm in the present moment, when I'm grounded in practice, principle responds, arrow points meet, the balance is already there. There's no separate existence at all. He's saying that, be careful, that this dwelling in the absolute is fine, as long as you don't dwell there. Realizing your connection with everything is fine, but you need to function in the relative world, and the two of those are not separate. So we tend to, in Zen, kind of emphasize our practice, our training in the relative. We're not trying to live in a transcendent universe, something special. So, but the student's a little bit, I came here to learn, to teach. What kind of guidance can you give me beyond that? And so the teacher says, to be perfectly honest, I'm not going to send you in any direction particular. I'm going to give you an opportunity to sit in this temple, to put the robe on, to wake up in the morning, to take the seat. If you don't understand the way right before you, if you don't see your seat as the seat, your practice as the practice, how will you know what to do? Where is your practice going to come from? From the outside, somewhere. Don't set up standards of your own. Means don't overlay on to the present your past concepts, your prejudices. But we don't say right and wrong, good or bad in Zen. We say skillful, unskillful, wholesome, unwholesome. I respectfully to urge you to study the mystery. You only get one mystery. Should be easy to solve if we realize that there's nothing mysterious about it at all. Many people live only in this relative world. They have good and they have bad, and they try to use the good to erase the bad. They try to find enlightenment to counteract delusion, and they're constantly struggling with these differences all the time. What do I do? But when our eyes are open to life itself, relative and absolute are not in opposition to each other. They're our own mind. We're seeing our own mind. How clearly can you see things in the midst of the most ordinary activity? So our eye of Zazen is what we look with. We rely on prajna, on wisdom, on being able to comfortably see worlds from both perspectives. The koans are examples of that pivotal moment where a student and teacher meet, and the teacher directs them towards something in their own nature that will allow them to open their own eyes. It does no good to put something in front of a student and say, follow me. That's why we put up so much emphasis on our practice, sitting on your own seat, doing the roles here in the Zendo that equals, ringing a bell is equal to practice. But it's not your bell. It belongs to everybody. So the sound is important. You're helping people to settle. The more you can help people to settle, the more you can be settled. So our path is easier. We don't practice just for ourselves alone. There's a healthy dose of Taoism in this teaching. And in the Flower Garland Sutra that speaks of this interconnected reality. There is nothing you can take separate from reality. So this monk was not a newcomer, obviously, but the teacher is giving him a caution. When you are talking about the relative, what happens to the absolute? If you live in the absolute, what are you doing about the relative? Nothing is unimportant. Nothing is just mundane. And we have no need to transcend something, get rid of something. I'm helping to, much to my, Dr. Corral, Dr. Corral, he asked me to help him write a book. And he's writing a book for patients, particularly, that are facing a disease and are confused, not just because of that, but because now we have so much information at our disposal that we could study 24 hours a day, searching. So they're not grounded. They don't have a way to practice themselves when they're thrown by this illness. And he feels that if they could learn to settle themselves, they could be more clear-eyed about what they're being asked to do by a doctor, and they could ask the questions of that doctor more clearly. He was asking me to help with that, and I always a little bit hesitant because I don't look at this practice as a kind of clinical exercise to fix some problem, but it is a skill. And this also, remember, we're talking too about extremes. Buddha entered a world in which the prevailing wisdom was the material world was bad. The body was a problem. If you beat it down hard enough, if you work on your spiritual side strong enough, you will transcend the difficulty of being human. Buddha tried it, and it didn't work very well. The very body he needed to practice in was the one he was killing. It didn't work. So he, in his first sermon, he said to his adepts, spiritual adepts, people who were at that highest level at that time, he said, "My brothers," and I think there were no women, I suppose, at these 4 or 5 at that time, "there are 2 extremes that a person on the path should avoid. One is to plunge oneself into sensual pleasures, and the other is to practice austerities which deprive the body of its needs. Both of these extremes lead to failure. The path I have discovered is the middle way, which avoids both extremes and has the capacity to lead one to understanding, to liberation, and to peace." And he begins to say, and it's the Eightfold Path, and so. So this practice, this way of finding that middle path between these 2 seemingly so-called awakening, enlightenment, the absolute, and our mundane, challenging life, somehow we've divided up as being separate. And so we find that middle way. This monk will enter this monastery, and he will now try to adjust his practice to the middle path. It's not just my memories and what I think of life, and it's not just what's pulling me into some oneness. But I should know the path that I'm walking. I should be clear about where I am and what I'm doing. We share the same nature, but we have very different ways of expressing it, that nature. Avoid the extreme push and pull. Settle ourselves on ourselves in that moment. And our zazen eye, our prajna eye, will be the most reliable tool. And that we cannot be taught, that we will experience for ourselves. And for that, training is important. having a consistent practice. We're creatures of habit, and we're also creatures of concepts. So we find our seat, and in that seat, concepts and habits are not so useful anymore. We could let them go. And the more we let them go, the less we're pushed and pulled by this surface world. So where are you from? Do you think of what brought you to this moment often? Is it separating you from what you're doing now? Is memory really an impediment? Is our character, how we were brought up, really an impediment? Is the physical world the enemy? Is our habits and conditions what we need to suppress? Not according to Buddha. But we don't think of our life as authentic. We think of it as somehow a series of conflicts, resolutions. This monk was no different than us. This monk, or I'm assuming a man, I don't know, will soon find out that progress, so-called, is really not a matter of far and near, not a matter of where you came from, not a matter of what's only in front of you, but just each moment, we call it practicing wholeheartedly, meaning we recognize that moment as the practice. So that's why we say, take care of your body, the product of many lives. Find that middle path between the extremes that are always presented to us. So the thinker is the mind, and the thought of is the environment, meaning there is no separation. This, by the way, this thought of this is a Yogacharan, yoga mind school thinking, meaning that there is no outside, there's nothing out there. The out there is mind itself. The world we live in is the world that we make, good, bad, or otherwise. And so our practice reflects that.
Zen Center of Pittsburgh Deep Spring Temple is sustained solely through generous donations. Please visit us at deepspringzen.org.